Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, Season 2, Episode 1, The King of Thieves. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happened in the episode. So, in this episode, it starts with Aeolus, and he's heading to Syros in order to meet his friend, obviously Hercules, who he expects to be in the area. As he's arriving, he comes across a group of people ganging up on one person, assumes the singular person is innocent without having any knowledge of the situation, so then goes ahead and saves the single person that's there, who then basically throws him under the bus, gives the chest that he was protecting to him after stealing one of the pieces from it, and then swings off through the trees as the group of people come back with the guards, and Aeolus learns that the man was Autolycus, the king of thieves, and he is now being considered as an accomplice to the theft because he has the chest of jewels and other assorted riches that Autolycus stole from the king, and he is basically thrown into prison. Hercules arrives in town and asks, "Hey, I'm looking for my friend. Has anybody seen him? He's yay high with blonde hair." And then one of the thugs, who isn't actually a thug but just a citizen that was trying to capture Autolycus, says, "Your friend gave me this black eye here and he's in prison." So Hercules goes to visit the king. The king is a little bit scatterbrained, more interested in his inventions than really people. And he basically says, "Oh, you're here for that thief? Well, yeah, we're going to execute him. Trial's tomorrow, but it's already a done deal." And Hercules is like, "I know this person. He would not have stolen this stuff." And they're like, "Well, maybe you should talk to his lawyer." And then, of course, he introduces his daughter, the princess, who is more about humanity than inventions. And she comes in and brings him to see. Her name is Dirce, and they bring her. She brings Hercules down to visit Aeolus in prison, where she basically says the tradition of Syros is that even if the original culprit cannot be found, somebody has to get executed for the crime, even if it's an innocent person. Therefore, because Aeolus was found with the chest, unless they can find Autolycus, who is the actual thief, Aeolus is going to be executed. So Hercules asks for delay tactics from Dirce in order to go find Autolycus, which he then leaves to do. And he does manage to find him pretty quickly, but Autolycus is slippery. He has tons of tricks, tons of hidden little knickknacks and gadgets and ways of escaping, and so he takes Hercules on a journey from escaping him in the woods to then leading him to an old castle to them then having a bit of a fight, but then the floor falls through. Then they're in a treasure room, but oh, there's a big giant snake there. Then they get away from the snake through a hole in the wall. Hercules holds it off while he then picks a lock on a door. They then end up in a room that does have a door to the exit, but it's a big giant stone door that has to be um, unlocked with a winch. So then they get the winch going. They have to uncover all of the debris off of it first because it's an abandoned castle. They manage to get the door up, but then they need something to hold the winch in place so that they can get through. As Autolycus is looking for something to hold the winch up, the big snake comes back through a side hallway, and so they then have to fight off this big snake before the winch breaks, as it does start to break once Hercules is no longer holding it. And so the door keeps closing a little bit, little bit, little bit. Finally, they manage to make it out of the door, but Autolycus is injured, but he does agree to let Hercules take him back now that they've been through this big adventure together. So Hercules brings him back to the kingdom. Meanwhile, the delaying tactics that the princess first tried, which was to have an independent audit of the evidence done, well, the guy who does the audit and the only person who does the independent audit retired just the day before, so that's not available. She then tries to bring up other presidents, but they're all rejected because they have very specific circumstances they're allowed in, and so in the end, she ends up having Aeolus take the Erebus test, which is basically putting him through a bunch of very difficult situations in order to prove his innocence. First one, dunking. They tie him to a rock, put him in the water for a certain amount of time. If he comes out alive, then he passes that test. If he's dead, well, then he was guilty. Um, Next test is what they called pressing, and basically has to hold up a giant rock covered in a bunch of other smaller rocks and not drop any for, again, a certain amount of time, which again he manages to just pass. And the last one wasn't given a specific name, but it essentially is being put in a pit with a boar, and he cannot shed any blood within the pit, or he will be considered guilty. But if he can survive for 3 hours with the boar and not shed any blood, then he is going to be considered innocent. He passes that test, but on his way out of the pit, he scratches his finger on a nail, which then leads to him bleeding, even though the test was already technically over. But the king then decides that that's enough. He's guilty without a doubt, and they then plan for his execution at dusk. So luckily, Hercules brings back Autolycus after their adventure, just as Aeolus is about to be executed, and Autolycus confesses, gives back the ruby he stole, and this then leads the king to stopping the execution, which happens just as in time because the rope of the guillotine literally snaps as he says to free him, and luckily Hercules is there to catch it, so Aeolus does not die. He's then freed, and Autolycus then escapes, and Hercules, Aeolus, and Dirce basically tell the king that, like these types of laws and justice, like they aren't real justice. You almost execute an innocent person. And he's like, tradition is tradition. And then Dirce's like, but you can change the laws. And he's like, I can. And she's like, you're the king. And then he's like, oh, I can then. You'll help me. And so they're basically going to be rewriting the laws to be a little bit more fair and humane. And then Dirce, through the trials that Aeolus has gone through, has gained some affection for him, and so invites him back once things have settled down, if he wants to come, to have a little bit of a romance. But that is the ending, and Autolycus, of course, escapes before he's arrested, so everything works out for everybody. So now that you've been reminded about what happened in the episode, we will now rank the episode. As always, we'll rank first on the mostly objective ranking list, which uses set values to determine the score. And while it is objective in that there's no emotional bias, well, there's no emotion in it, bias and judgment can still apply. And then the personal ranking list follows that, which is based purely on opinion and entertainment value. So we start with our single episode supporting character introduction, which is King Menelaus. Then we have the multi-episode supporting character introduction, which is Dirce. And then we have the multi-season supporting character introduction, which is Autolycus, who will recur several times in the double digits throughout the series. And then we have the multi-season main character development, which of course is Aeolus taking the fall for Autolycus and then being put through a rigged trial. We then have the world building worth 4 points, which is the Erebus test, or Erebus test, which includes dunking, pressing, and then what I'm calling the pit because it didn't get an official name, but it is putting you in a pit with a boar, so seems fair. And this is their innocence test to kind of avoid the like if you pass all these tests, you're considered innocent no matter what the evidence said, essentially, or guilty no matter what the evidence said. And then that brings us to 14 points for our episode, but we still do have some negative points to take off. First negative point is thievery is bad. Stealing from people, even if you do it in somewhat of a Robin Hood-esque way, like Autolycus says he does, like his backstory was essentially his brother got cheated out of his land and ended up, destitute. When he tried to bring the situation to court. He was killed by the merchant who tricked him out of his land, and so in order to get revenge, Autolycus stole everything the merchant had, leaving him destitute and to live in squalor and poverty, and gave all of his wealth to all of the poorest people in the city, Robin Hood-esque. Um, but thievery still always is wrong. It is against the law. And obviously, people work hard to earn what they have. So taking from those people without earning it yourself is just never going to be a good look or a good thing. So -2 points. And then we have -2 points for the show or mock or rigged trial, whatever you'd like to call it. Essentially, everybody's already made up their mind. The judge, who is the king, has already made up his mind that he is going to execute Aeolus, regardless of whether people protest his innocence, regardless of what evidence may say, regardless of any testimonies. Basically, even the princess, when she's going through, she's like, unless you can bring in Autolycus to be the real person, the king is going to just execute Aeolus even if he's innocent because somebody needs to die for the crime. So basically, it's not a fair trial. It's not a trial to find justice. It is just a trial for show in order to execute somebody for stealing the treasury so that the king doesn't look weak, but it doesn't matter to him whether the person's innocent or guilty. So that, of course, is also a terrible thing, -2 points. However, that still leaves us with a 10 out of 10 for this episode. As it's the first episode of season 2, the King of Thieves is in first place. And then for myself, my personal ranking of it, I decided to give it a 9 out of 10. I almost considered giving it a 10, but I felt like because it's the first episode of this season, and because I did think some of the unfairness of the mock show trial did kind of make me angry, and I don't like negative emotions, and some of the fight scenes with Hercules were a little bit frustrating because like Autolycus kept slipping out, and it's like, Hercules, why do you keep making the same mistake over and over? You already tried tying his hands, he cut them. You tried tying his hands again, he still managed to cut them. You tried tying him like all over the place, he still got out of it. Like, he's an escape artist. Let's try something new, maybe like a chain or something instead of like rope. Anyways, some of it was a little bit frustrating. So I gave it a 9 instead because it had a lot of comedy. The tests were funny. The king and Darcy were funny. Autolycles was funny. The misadventures that they were going on was funny and entertaining, and the action was pretty good. Even fighting against the snake had like a frog's tongue. It was able to like send it out and wrap around things and like pull things to it. It was pretty cool. So the treasure room was cool. The old abandoned castle setting was cool. So everything was good, but there were just a couple frustrating moments. And that's why I decided to be a little more conservative with my score and go with a 9 instead of a 10. Though I do think that it was a very high 9, because I almost considered giving it a 10 as well. And I did really enjoy the episode. And I think it was a good start to the season to start on such a strong episode. And since most of the episodes aren't linked to each other, that was a choice, and I think that they made the right one by putting that one as the first. So, having said that, again, it is the first episode of the season, so it is on first place, The King of Thieves. And that brings us to the series ranking so far. On our mostly objective ranking, reminder, season 1 ended with a score of 71.54%, and season 2 starting strong with a 10 out of a possible 240 this time. Personal ranking was season 1 ending with 73.85%, and season 2 again starting strong with a 9 out of a possible 240. But with that, we have now rewatched and ranked Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, Season 2, Episode 1, The King of Thieves. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.